welcome to Diaries of a Farmhouse. Today we're talking water, but first I just want you to know I just finished filming my terrarium video, and I would love it if you went and checked that out after this video. It was a lot of fun to film. Terrariums are a lot of fun to make, so if you're interested, you can definitely check it out. So today we're talking watering. I have some friends here who are going to help me out with that. There are some issues that can occur when watering, and I have definitely experienced both of these issues. So I am an overwaterer. I get bored, I stare at my plants, I think, oh, they need water. So I go and water them. I also was that person that watered on a set schedule, and we'll talk about why that's not very good for your plants. So at one point, I had pretty much every plant I had when I first started had some kind of damage because of my overwatering habits. On the other end of the scale, I have also underwatered my plants to the point where they've gotten pretty crispy and they've almost died. Some of them did die. So you can have both ends of the spectrum. We're going to talk about some things that will help you avoid that. There are 6 things we're going to talk about today. And let me tell you, I forget everything, especially when I'm put on the spot like this. Like, obviously you guys aren't really here, but I feel like I'm on the spot, and I will forget. So I have my book right here. So if you see that, it has my list. Okay, so the 6 things that we're going to talk about today: the type of pots that you're using, your soil type, the type of water you use to water your plants. Yes, it makes a difference. 4, where are your plants located in your house? 5, the type of plant that you have. And 6, how often to water and how to check if your plants need water. So I'm going to put that away. The first thing is pots. Okay, pots make a huge difference in how often and how much you water. So I have a few different types of pots here. I have recently gone back to using nursery pots. So I was that person that also, when I first brought home a plant, I would throw it right into a new pot. I have kind of now changed the way that I do things because, mainly because I've watched a lot of Plantarina's videos, and she had a video about why you should keep your plants in nursery pots. And it made a lot of sense. So I've had also some plants that I've put back into nursery pots that had root damage, that were struggling. There's a fungus net. Excuse me. So I have put a lot of them back into nursery pots, and there's a few reasons why I did this. Your plant needs drainage. People will tell you you can plant plants in pots that don't have drainage. Not true. So I had a fiddly fig in a pot that did not have drainage. And did it do okay? Yeah, it did. But eventually your plant is going to get soggy soil, and that excess moisture will not be able to drain out of the pot, which will leave your plant with issues like root rot or even bacterial issues from the soil. So nursery pots are fabulous because they have a ton of drainage on the bottom. So if you can see, there's a lot of drainage holes there on the bottom. I also have another example over here with this philodendron. Okay, lots of drainage in the bottom. Okay, this means that when you water your plant, any excess water is going to run out the bottom, and your plant won't be sitting in soggy soil. The other cool thing about leaving them in their nursery pots and just updating the size of the nursery pot is that if you change your decor style, you can definitely change the pot. Excuse me. Okay. We'll just pretend like that didn't happen. Okay, so you can change the style of your pots a lot easier because all you have to do is take out the plant, put it in a new pot, right? So those are a couple of reasons why keeping them in the nursery pots is really helpful to your plant, because you're not disturbing the root every time you decide that you want to change what pot it's in, but also your plant is getting way more drainage than it would in any other situation. So that is the first thing, okay? Nursery pots. The second thing is if you want to put your plant directly into a pot, which is fine. I have so many that are planted in pots that are doing fine. I mean, but the type of pot that you plant them in makes a difference in how much soil or how much water you're going to give your plant and how often. So pots like terracotta and pots like cement. Okay, I make cement pots. I sell them on my website. So I have obviously a lot of plants in my own pots. So I have 2 pots here that are porous, okay, which means when I water these plants, the pot is going to absorb a lot of that excess moisture, which is going to leave the soil drier more often, okay. That's why a lot of succulents are in terracotta, because it keeps the soil a little more on the dry side. I've also transferred a lot of my aeroids into terracotta just because, like I said, I'm an overwaterer, and this kind of helps to get rid of the excess moisture that I'm putting in there. They also have drainage, so that's really cool. So if you have a plant that is in a porous pot, keep that in mind when watering, okay? Because if you compare that to your ceramic pots, okay, your glazed pots, your ceramic pots, the non-porous plastic, it's going to keep the moisture in the soil a lot longer, which means that you're not going to have to water as often. So if I put the same plant in these 2 pots, they're going to be on different watering schedules because the pots make a difference in the amount of moisture that is retained in the soil. The size of the pot also matters, because if I have my Monstera in a huge pot, I mean, if you've seen my Instagram, I mean, it's huge. I'm not going to have to water that plant as often because there's more room to keep the moisture in the soil. Whereas when they're in littler pots, there's less room for the moisture to be retained. It's going to evaporate off a lot quicker. So, those are a few things that are important to consider when watering your plants. Is what pot is your plant put in? What is it in? Because that makes a difference. I know I've repeated that like 6 times, but it makes a difference. The next thing we're going to talk about is soil type, because the type of soil that your plant is put in will also make a difference in how often you water and how much. So if you have a plant in a succulent citrus soil mix, something with pumice and sand, it's going to drain off the excess water a lot sooner, and it's going to not hold as much moisture in that soil, so it's going to dry out a lot quicker. If you have something that is a little more chunky, right, like the soil's got a lot of bark and perlite in it, it's going to drain off the excess moisture a lot quicker. The bark will retain a little bit of the moisture. If you have something like your typical run-of-the-mill Miracle-Gro, that's going to retain a lot more moisture, and it's not going to drain off as much water. So that plant will probably not need water as often. So keep in mind your soil and how much moisture that soil is keeping in. The third thing is the type of water you use. It's not something that I really worry about that much, but it can make a difference. So I just use our tap water, but the amount of minerals and chemicals in your water can make a difference on whether or not your plant is going to be happy or not. So usually calatheas are the biggest example of this. Excuse me. They are pretty finicky about literally everything. Let's be real. But if we're just talking about water, a lot of times they will not like your tap water, and it will cause them to have major issues. So that does not mean you have to go out and buy filtered water for every single one of your plants or go collect huge buckets of rainwater. But just keep in mind that you might have certain plants that aren't doing well because they're not getting water that is filtered. Betty! Oh. Okay. I haven't decided if I want to leave this clip in there or not, but I just had a minor panic attack because I just heard a coyote like super close to our house, and they freaked me out. So, but I'm back. I don't even remember what I was talking about. Oh, I think we were getting into where your plant is located. Yeah. That's the one. So, where your plant is located in your house can have a huge effect on how much water it is taking in, as well as how much is evaporating off. So, if I have a plant in my windowsill, it's going to be getting a lot more sunlight, if that's what it needs, and it's going to have a lot more warmth. So, the plant is going to have ideal conditions to grow, therefore it's going to be taking in a lot more water. But also, it's going to cause some of that water to evaporate off the soil. So if you have a plant in a windowsill, it's probably going to need more water than a plant that is maybe in a darker corner of your house. Grow lights can often have the same effect, but it kind of depends on what grow light you have and where. So a lot of the plants on these shelves behind me under these grow lights, usually they do not have a lot of moisture evaporate out of their soil. In fact, I water them a lot less. Even though they're getting the light and they're growing and they're taking in the moisture, we're not having the water evaporate off the soil as much. So that's something to consider when you're watering your plants, is their location. If you have the same plant, say I have this Ficus elastica in a window, and I have one maybe over here in the corner. That one in the window is going to need a lot more water. It's going to need water more often than the one that's in the corner. Number 5 is, what type of plant do you have? This is going to affect how much water you give your plant and how often. So the majority of the plants that I have here on the table, in fact all of them, pretty much except for the African violet, like to be watered once they've dried out quite a bit. So some plants like to be completely dry before you water them again, such as like succulents and cacti. But some plants like a lot more moisture in the soil. So you've got like begonias, they like a lot more moisture. Fiddle leaf figs like to have quite a bit of moisture. Not soggy soil, but a little more moisture in the soil than some other plants. And then most aroids like to dry out almost all the way before you water them again. So, pretty much all of these I water when the first like inch to 2 inches is dry, but it kind of depends on how big the plant is too. And we'll talk more about how to tell when your plant needs water. But you need to also keep in mind that you need to research the plants that you have to figure out how much water they need, because if I have a corn plant that I'm giving just tons of water to, it's going to die. Or if I have a plant that needs a lot more water and I'm not watering it at all, it's going to die. So research the plants that you have and their watering needs. Okay, number 6 is the moment we've all been waiting for, which is how to tell when your plant needs water. And there's a few different methods for this. So these are some things that I had to learn when taking care of my plants, because like I said, I was a scheduled waterer. Every weekend, every plant got water. And this is not good, because some plants maybe didn't need water every weekend. Maybe all the water that I gave them last weekend hadn't been soaked up or evaporated off or whatever. So you need to be more tentative and intuitive to your plants. So, and it'll take you longer to water because you're spending more time with each plant. But at the same time, this gives you the opportunity to check for other things that are going on with your plants. So the first thing is just sticking your finger in the soil and feeling it, right? So a lot of plants, you can stick your finger about 1 inch or 2 in the soil and kind of feel. If there's a lot of moisture in there, you don't need to water. Okay, but if you stick your finger in there and it's dry, depending on what plant you have, you're going to need to water it. Okay, Other method that you can use, let me get it out of my toolbox, is a toothpick. Or not a toothpick, a chopstick. Okay, you've probably seen at some point or another, if you follow the plant community on Instagram, people using chopsticks to aerate the soil, put air in the soil, but also to check if their plant needs water. So I would say raise your hand if you've ever used a toothpick to check if your cake is done, but I can't see you. So I guess if you want to, comment in the down below if you have ever used that trick. But this is similar, but just with plants and soil. So you take your chopstick. I'm going to use this alocasia, for example, and I'm going to just stick it in the soil all the way to the bottom of the pot. Okay, I like to twist it around a little bit. If you feel like you're snapping something, stop, because you're breaking roots. You don't want to force it into the soil too close to the plant because you're going to break roots. Okay, so I kind of stick it in there and I draw it out. And you can kind of see that there's soil on the end of it. That means there's some moisture still in this soil, or there's still moisture in this plant. But when I touch it, it's not super damp, which means that this plant probably could use a drink. Okay, some people also use moisture meters. So my original one broke, but I just bought this one today. This one does pH, light, and moisture. So for moisture meters, sometimes they can be pretty unreliable. You just stick it in the soil, okay, all the way down, and then kind of leave it. You're going to read your meter, right? So this one says that this is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being wet, 4 through 6 being moist, kind of those ideal watering conditions for most plants, and then dry. This is a 2, so that tells me this plant probably needs water. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see that, but some are different. But the problem with moisture meters is they can become faulty, and then at certain points they can tell you inaccurate information. So the last one I had broke, and it kept telling me all of my plants needed water. Obviously, that becomes an issue if I completely trust my humidity meter or my moisture meter, because if it's telling me my plants need water and I'm not using any of these other methods to check that, I might be giving a plant more water that didn't need water, right? Or if it's saying that the soil is moist and I don't water that plant, it's going to dry out. So if you use a moisture meter, I would suggest using this maybe first, and then using some of the other methods to check that your moisture meter is correct. Okay. The other way to check if your plants need water, and this does not work for all of them, but some plants tell you when they need water. So if I'm reading this alocasia, we've already used the moisture meter that told us it needed water. We've already used the chopstick, which told us it needed water. But if I'm reading my plant, I can see that this leaf is starting to curl a little bit on the edges, okay, which tells me that it needs water. Okay, this leaf has not yet started to curl, so if this plant was watered and had water, the moisture that it needed in the soil, the leaf should look more like this, not curled. Okay, another example is my Sansevieria up there, the Moonlight, I think it is. Okay, the leaves are starting to curl on that. That tells me it needs water. Okay, so read your plants. Okay, Hoyas and succulents, sometimes you can use what I learned is called the taco trick. You take your leaf, and obviously this is not a Hoya, but this is what you would do. You would just gently kind of try to fold the leaf. If it feels like it's going to snap, it doesn't need water. However, if it's soft and it folds really easily, it needs water. So, kind of read your plants, okay? You can also pick them up and feel their weight, right? So some things that doesn't necessarily work on, because if you're not picking up your plants all the time or they're too big to pick up, you're not going to know. However, you can pick up your plant when it's wet, kind of feel how much it weighs, and then from there you can decide whether your plant needs water or not, if it's lighter than it usually is or not. Okay. Wow, that was a lot of information, a lot of talking. but I think I've about covered it. If you have any other tips or tricks that you think I should add, go ahead and drop them down below. Oh, you know what? I just thought of something else that I should talk about. You know, I'll make another video about it. Yeah. So, if you have anything else that you want me to talk about, anything else you want to add, please drop it in the comments below. I would love to hear what you have to say. So, if you're interested in any of my products, go ahead and check out diariesoffarmhouse.com or check out our Instagram at diariesoffarmhouse.shop. My plant Instagram is madplants with 2 Ds. I'll put all of that down below. I also have Twitter and some Facebook pages. Not active on the Facebook pages, but they're there. So, yeah. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos like this. And thank you for stopping by. And I'll see you later.